Good morning, everyone. My name is Alistair Hamill. Thank you very much for the invitation to join you with at Brew Ed East London this morning. As you'll tell from my accent, I don't come from East London. I'm joining you this morning from County Antrim, where if I want to tell you to hold on to something, I'm much more likely to say, "Hold on." So this morning, I thought I would talk to you about, now that we're back into schools teaching face-to-face, and big relief, isn't it? Are there things that we might actually want to hold on to from that period of remote learning? And the thing in particular that I'm going to be looking at is this feedback loop. This sits right at the heart and the core of what it means to be a teacher and to be interacting with the students. Whenever I started back into teaching in the classroom in September again after the first lockdown, I wrote this in a blog. It's good to be back in the classroom, isn't it? Despite all the differences, the changes in seating plans, the social distancing that means you can't interact with the classes as much, the one-way systems, perhaps even the mask wearing. Despite it all, it's good to be back. The interacting with real human beings, asking questions, responding to the pupils' quizzical looks when something doesn't quite make sense to them, and fostering those relationships again, which are the heartbeat of what makes this job so rewarding. And right at the heart of the heartbeat is that feedback loop. Now, by feedback, I'm talking about something much more than just simply writing a comment or two, a few EBIs at the end of some work. I'm talking about that living, breathing, dynamic, organic process that constantly goes on in the classroom as we gather information from the pupils about how effectively they're assimilating the knowledge into their schemas, and then how we use that information to clarify, address misconceptions, consolidate effective learning. It's that constant, ongoing, dynamic process. Rosenshine's principles say this about it. Effective teachers also stop to check for understanding. They check for understanding by asking questions, by asking students to summarize the presentations up to that point, or by repeating directions or procedures, or by asking students whether they agreed or disagreed with other students' answers. This checking, he says, has two purposes. Answering the questions might cause the students to elaborate on the material they've learned and augment connections to other learning in their long-term memory, or by B, alerting the teacher to when parts of the material need to be retaught. That feedback loop is central to what it means to be a teacher. And yet for most of the term so far, this has been the extent of our feedback loop, hasn't it? Teaching to a blank screen. Is anybody there? And how great it is to be back into the classroom again, to be face-to-face to allow us to do that. And yet, I think there are ways, and certainly I think I've found some ways during that period of remote learning to embody and to embrace some of that feedback material that might be worth considering holding on to now that we're back to face-to-face. And the journey for me to finding those started actually in term one, whenever we had that disruption of students that were self-isolating. And teachers were being asked to do two jobs at once: teach the students that were in front of you at the same time as teaching students that were at home self-isolating. An impossible ask in many ways. But I came up with this notion of resilient teaching for our teachers in school. It was a resilience defined as a measure of the persistence of classroom systems and their ability to absorb change and disturbance. And this is the crucial bit, while still maintaining the same relationships between their elements. So this graphic shows the teacher doing two jobs at once: teaching face-to-face, teaching remotely at the same time. And I devised a variety of different ways for the staff that we could do that. The one that I'm going to look at this morning with you is this digital Jotter, the idea behind this. Now, for digital Jotter, the setup of it is pretty simple. We're just going to be using Google Slides, and just like anything, you would set this up with the content that you want on it. I typically put the student's name at the top, and in this case, I was using Google Slides for retrieval practice. And what I simply did then, once I had got the first slide set up, was that I copied that and made a slide available for every student. The students then went in and they put their names in. And what I was able to do was to monitor them as they're doing this live. I can see how fast they're picking up this, how well they're remembering this information. If somebody is slow and hesitant, I can then pick up and infer some things there about how well they're doing. And of course, because this is Google Slides, I'm actually able to do this from an overview as well. I'm able to do something that I can't do in the classroom, because the students are used to retrieval practice with their jotters. But if you have 28 students in your class, how do you see how everybody's doing at once? Not easily. How do you see it in the digital Jotter? Very easily. I actually discovered it was adding functionality to something beyond what I was able to do in the classroom. You can also use it for live monitoring of people's answers to questions. So here was something I was doing here, was getting them to answer questions based on some exam style questions. And again, I'm able to go in and live monitor them as they're doing it. I'm able to give them feedback as they're doing it. In this case, Abigail did very well, but in other students, I was able to go in and ask elaborative style questions. Why is that? Can you develop this point a little bit further? And again, because I was able to see everybody's work at the same time, I was able to see who I needed to zoom in on and to help. You can take it even further with something like monitoring extended answers. What I'm able to do in this is to set them really challenging AO2, AO3 style questions using resources within geography. But I set them up here with a couple of different maps. They're looking at rainfall and flooding. They're related but different. I got them to have a go at writing their first answer. And again, I was able to monitor what they were doing, have a look at how they're getting on. But what we then was able to do was to get them to go and have a look at each other's answers. Because one of the criticisms, they're copying from each other. They might be copying. Well, yeah, that adds functionality though, because it gives you a chance for peer assessment. I can see where their little icons are whenever they're working on the slide view. I know if somebody's on somebody else's slide, and very quickly they get the message whenever I say, John, back to your own slide, please. Mr. Hamill sees everything. But you can then lean into this as part of that peer assessment. Right, folks, I want you to go and find what you think is the best answer there. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to have a look through, and your icon can appear beside the best answer. And I can see them doing that. And then what we were able to do is to have an interactive process where I questioned them on what was good about this and provide some annotation. And they then went on and wrote their answer to the second map. Also, we can use Google Slides for this learning as an iterative process. Learning as an iterative process means that the answers that the students give in the first instance aren't very often the best and final form of it. They need to reiterate them. They need to say them over and over again. And I did this with a sixth form class with Year 14, which is Year 13 in England. And we were able to go through with a slightly smaller class here and give them a really difficult, very challenging AO2 style question to go into a GIS map and apply their knowledge. And then what I was doing with them was coming through and asking them questions. We really honed in on the language of expression. Can you speak like a geographer? Can you say that better? And through that question and answer process, we were able to refine the wording that the students were using in their answers. And again, we're all able to see this at the same time. We're working on each other's answers as we go through at the same time. So those are some examples of how I have used the digital Jotter. Now, am I going to keep hold of it? Yeah, I totally am. I totally am. Because I think that what I've learned through this is that digital Jotters can add value to the feedback loop. And these are some of the ways in which I think they can do it. Now, we in our school have a very open bring your own device policy. We allow their students to access and use them. So context is always with these things is key. But I am absolutely going to lean into that openness to be able to use these things, because I think that in the classroom setting, this can enhance my ability to monitor the pupils' work and to interact with them as we are engaging together in that feedback loop. It's great to be back into the classroom. It's great to be back to face-to-face teaching. But this is something that I'm going to hold on to.